Hi everybody, welcome to the Saturday Surface Interval in association with Mpora, but more about Mpora later. So today we are looking at how it is best to store your scuba diving equipment because, well, it is winter, at least in the Northern Hemisphere that is, and very few of us have been diving very much this year. Dive equipment, like small children, don't do very well when they're stored in a dark cupboard under the stairs for long periods of time, but there are some things that you can do to make them more comfortable during long periods of storage. Dive equipment, that is, not small children. Now, there are quite a few bad things that can actually happen to your scuba diving equipment when it's stored incorrectly, and some of the worst case scenarios are actually fatal. Some divers have died from equipment that has been stored badly and ended up killing them. Now, it is incredibly rare, but divers have been storing their equipment for a long time compared to normal this year, so we should really be doing it correctly. Okay, so let's start to store our gear properly. First of all, we need to be washing and cleaning our regulators better than we already are. I've seen plenty of regulators come in for servicing with, oh yes, of course, I wash them after all of my dives, but when you actually open them up, they are just chock full of verdigris and salt and just other rubbish. Regulators need more than just a quick short spray with a garden hose. You should really take some time to get in there with an old toothbrush and get into all of the little corners and wash everything thoroughly so fresh soapy water can actually get everywhere. Just not inside the first stage or inside the hoses. Don't get water inside there. Cover up that first stage inlet and never ever push the purge button when you're washing your regulators, but other than that, water can go everywhere. In a perfect world, we would store our regulators with the hoses as straight as possible, because as soon as you start to bend a hose, it puts a little bit of strain on one side and compresses the other side of that hose. After a while, if a hose is bent too much for too long, it will start to crack. And once the integrity of a hose is gone in one particular area, it can start to fray and it will eventually fail. Store your regulators as flat as you can, but try not to coil them up too much or too much in one specific area. Regulators do best when they're used every so often, so do your best to take them on a dive once a month or so, so that the O-rings can have a chance to kind of move around and loosen up a little bit. If the mechanism doesn't move around too long, the soft sealing parts can actually harden and become brittle and eventually crack. If you can, find a local dive club with access to a swimming pool so that you can actually use your regulators every so often and just out of the season. Also, for longer storage, I actually like to keep the purge button pressed on my second stages. It actually reduces the force on the shuttle and it stops that shuttle from actually pressing down into the seat so it doesn't actually bed in. Some regulators or some second stages actually have this feature built into them. Tanks are seen as really strong and tough and never changing, but they can actually be stored incorrectly with dire consequences. Now, the perfect way to store a cylinder is with about 10 or 20 bar, not very much of pressure, but still some, inside and upright in a cool, dark place. The internal pressure of a cylinder will change depending on its temperature. If you take a cylinder with 200 bar of pressure at room temperature and then take it outside and leave it in the sun for half an hour, the pressure inside will actually increase. Too much of this and a cycle of going from hot to cold and cold to hot is actually bad for the integrity of the tank, so that should be avoided. Tanks should be stored for long periods near empty too. Not completely empty because that's how moisture gets in, but completely full actually accelerates any corrosion that's happening inside. Oxidizing the metal on the inside of the tank uses up some of the oxygen in the gas in your tank, which in rare cases has produced carbon monoxide, which is very dangerous for divers. So for long periods, 3 months or more, it's best to actually fill your tank with some fresh air. So drain it completely, drain it off, and then take it to get filled again with some nice fresh air. And store your tanks upright as well. Laying them down flat does seem to make more sense. They can't fall over and damage anything, but actually laid down, any contaminants, no matter how minute, over time will collect at the lowest point and actually start to corrode the tank where they are. If this is going to happen anywhere, it should be on the strongest part of the tank, not the weakest. The walls are actually the weakest part of a tank. The bottom is the thickest and the strongest part of the tank, so it's best to keep your tanks upright. Mpora is the sponsor of this episode. So Mpora is an online magazine that is all about inspiring adventure. Whether that adventure involves sliding around on a snowy mountain, pulling yourself up on a rock climbing wall, riding your bike through wooded trails, or surfing barrels down at the beach, and of course, yes, exploring the underwater world with Simply Scuba, Mpora is a website that has got you covered. In that website, you will find everything: interviews with interesting people, previews of sort of new events and equipment, reviews of equipment, news in general, and just everything to keep yourself clued up on the big outdoor issues. Mpora has got the lot, so definitely check them out after this video. BCDs are sealed plastic bags with some fancy valves and straps and pockets and stuff attached. That's about it. Sealed plastic bags with a bit of moisture trapped inside are the perfect breeding grounds for all sorts of nasties, and the next time you go to orally inflate your BCD, they're just going to end up in your mouth. After your dive, you need to wash and clean your BCD inside and outside with warm soapy water to kill all of the nasties and flush out any salt from the valves. Unlike your regulators, it's better if you do push all of the buttons and undo things on your BCD when you're actually washing it. There is no place where water should not go in your BCD. It can go everywhere, so make sure you wash every square centimetre of your BCD inside and out. After you've given it a good and thorough clean and made sure that the inside is completely dry as well, get all the water out of that, inflate your BCD a little bit so that the inside of the bladder isn't actually touching itself inside, because that can actually stick and corrode if the walls of your bladder are actually touching. But don't fully inflate it neither, because this can actually put quite a strain on the sort of heat seams as well. I mean, I once bust a bladder by overinflating a BCD again and again just to test the valves, so try to avoid fully inflating your BCD too much. Once it's completely dry on the inside and the outside, again, store it somewhere cool and dark, out of the sunlight, because sunlight can actually discolor your BCD quite quickly, and heat and cold just kind of warps and hardens plastics. So a cool, dark place is best for your BCD, and try and keep it sort of off the floor as well, especially if you're storing it sort of outside in a shell or a garage, because mice actually quite like the fabric of it, so you want to get it out of the way. Wetsuits need to be washed because they get quite stinky after a while, so just like your BCD, give them a good wash with some antibacterial, antifungal treatment or something to kill all of the nasties growing in the fabric, and then let it dry completely, again out of direct sunlight. Because wetsuits aren't exactly breathable, you need to dry them thoroughly inside and out, otherwise things are just going to start growing inside of them. To store them long term, the absolute best way would be to literally put it on an ergonomic mannequin so that the arms, legs and the body are kept in the suit's natural ergonomic position. If, unlike most people, you don't have stock of posable mannequins at home, hanging your dry suit on a coat hanger is an acceptable alternative, but do be sure to have the widest coat hanger possible. All of the weight of your wetsuit is going to be bearing down on the shoulders, and the soft neoprene can warp and it can crease. When you're storing your wetsuit, you want to avoid folding and creasing. That is your primary focus. Creasing neoprene actually crushes the bubbles out of the neoprene in that one line, and you'll end up with a cold patch. If you lay your wetsuit down flat so the weight of the suit isn't pulling on a coat hanger, that is a little bit better. But if you're limited on space and you need to fold your suit, then try rolling it as much as possible instead of folding it to avoid creasing. And again, keep it up out of the way so that small rodents and things can't get to it, because they absolutely love neoprene because it's nice and warm. It's easy for them to chew up and shred. So after a long term of storage outside in a garden shed, don't be surprised if there's a little sort of hole or even a big hole in your wetsuit because the mice or anything have gotten to it. So hopefully that should help you keep your gear looking newer and feeling newer for longer, and avoid some potential pitfalls that can damage your gear and also be potentially dangerous. A few people have died from that carbon monoxide poisoning and the sort of bacteria growing inside their BCD. So do be very careful and make sure your stuff is nice and clean when you put it away. Let us know your favorite storage techniques down in the comments below, and of course don't forget to check out our Teespring store for a new scuba diving t-shirt or hoodie. Thank you for watching, and of course, safe diving.